We can finally talk about the Forger of Ancient Names, another 5-star Geo character from the Children of Echoes, Xilonen, after her kit was officially announced in the Genshin Impact version 5.1 livestream. Hi, this is Earlbedo. And to be honest, I'm quite amazed with both her design and kit. So in this video, I'll help you decide if pulling for her is worth it. We'll talk about her role in the team, her talents and kit, her best builds, and possible best team comps. Take note that this is a pre-release guide and analysis, so some things might change during the actual release. With that, let's get started. Genshin has been trying to revive and redeem Geo, seen from the past two 5-star Geo characters that were released. It started with Navia, who doesn't only output huge damage comparable to top DPSs, but also works incredibly well with non-Geo teammates. Chiori is next. She's not as strong and flexible as Navia, but we can say that along with Navia, this is Hoyoverse's way of putting Geo back to meta, and Xilonen is no exception. Xilonen can be a pure support slash shredder slash healer or a main Geo DPS, depending on her team comp. Her kit looks promising, so let's take a look at it. Let's first talk about her elemental skill. Once used, she will enter the Skull Blade Roller mode and Night Soul Blessing state while gaining Night Soul points. During this state, you will see these 3 triangular icons which are called samplers, and they change depending on your teammates' elements. The samplers start as Geo, and for each party member who has Pyro, Hydro, Cryo, or Electro, one Geo sampler will change to that corresponding element. Sadly, it will not work for Anemo and Dendro. She can activate this sampler to reduce enemies' elemental resistance to whatever element the sampler is by up to 36% at level 10. That's crazy! To paint a picture, Zhongli's resistance shred is only 20%, although Zhongli's shred is for all the elements and physical too. While Anemo characters wearing Viridescent Vener set shreds 40%, but you have to make sure to swirl constantly to trigger this effect. On the other hand, for Xilonen, to activate the sampler and trigger the elemental shred, you need to fill the Night Soul meter. Her passive skill states that you need at least 2 Pyro, Hydro, Cryo, or Electro characters so that her normal attack and plunging attacks gives her 35 Night Soul points per hit. But if there are less than 2 Pyro, Hydro, Cryo, or Electro characters, her normal attack and plunging attacks deals more damage instead. Yes, she cannot perform charge attack during her Blade Roller mode, but when she is in this stance, aside from the increased damage from her passive, she will also convert her damage to Geo based on her death. This is why earlier I mentioned that she can be a support or a main DPS. This is one of the reasons why I like her so much. Her Elemental Burst deals death-based Geo damage once used. And if you have 2 Pyro, Hydro, Cryo, or Electro characters in the team, she will heal the team over time based on her death. It's just insane how she can shred resistance while also being able to heal the team. And surprisingly, this is coming from a Geo character. On the other hand, if you have less than 2 Pyro, Hydro, Cryo, or Electro characters in the team, she will instead deal 2 additional Geo damage based on her death. Another notable mechanic is her other passive where her death increases when another character, specifically Natlan characters, in the team triggers Night Soul Burst, which happens when the Natlan character or teammate deals elemental damage. So here's a quick summary of Xilonen's amazing kit. She can be a very reliable support slash healer as she has more than 2 Pyro, Hydro, Cryo, Electro characters in the team, which I think most players will go with. She can also be a great DPS if there are less than 2 converted samplers. I say decent because her damage multipliers as of now are not as high as, let's say, Arlecchino. But I think she is far from being below average, and no, I'm not saying any names here. Next, she also works especially well with Natlan characters because of her passive and also the new supportive artifact set, which we'll talk more about later. Overall, Xilonen is very flexible, especially for a Geo character. But is she better than Kazuha and Zhongli or other dedicated support like Goro or Zhevrus? I cannot say my final verdict yet since we still need more testing once she is released. But what I can say is she is definitely at par with Kazuha when the right artifact is used, and you can definitely use her with Kazuha if you're using Pyro or Hydro, Cryo, or Electro main DPSs. Just imagine having a lot of resistance shred and healing with a very reliable CC in one team. For Zhongli, she definitely beats her in terms of resistance shred, but Zhongli has the strongest shield in the game and can also decrease all elemental resistance and even physical resistance. So it's really a case-to-case basis. But like Kazuha, you can definitely use them both in one team activating Geo Resonance. I think her kit is very solid, especially as a support, putting her in the same tier with both Kazuha and Zhongli. Before we continue, if you are enjoying this video, please subscribe to my channel because I make Genshin Impact guides like this almost every week. Now that you know how she works, let's move on to her possible build, starting with her weapon choices. Obviously, her signature weapon will be her best in slot, especially as a support, but she actually has a lot of FTP choices, so you won't really need to get her signature weapon. As a support, you mainly want to stack Def to her, but also ER if you want to burst every cooldown to heal the team. First in the list, and quite possibly her best F2P weapon, is the craftable Natlan weapon, Ludov Espitza. The main stat is Def, but the passive is really good for her since it increases her Def by up to 32% if she uses her skill for 15 seconds. Next, if you are old as a dinosaur and have been playing Genshin Impact since 2021, you definitely have a Cinnabar Spindle. The skill damage buff is not particularly useful, but the very high def percentage is what we need. For stacking ER, the obvious choice is Favonia's Sword since this also gives energy for the whole team. As a DPS, there are also tons of choices, both from 4 and 5 stars, and F2P and non-F2P options. First two dev weapons I mentioned earlier are good F2P choices. If you can spend for BP, the Black Sword is a solid choice since it gives crit rate and also normal attack damage, which is perfect for her. For 5 stars, Fiori's signature weapon might be her top choice since this gives a huge amount of crit damage, normal attack buff, and def. Ayato's signature weapon is also good since it gives crit rate, elemental damage bonus, and normal attack buff. If you had this for Ayato, just give it to her because nobody really uses Ayato anymore, right? Ayaka's weapon is another solid choice. Generally, all crit sword will suffice. It's just amazing to see how she has a lot of potential while being very F2P friendly. Xilonen is also blessed with a lot of artifact choices. The new Natlan sets are perfect for both her playstyle. As a support, her best artifact will be the Skull of Hero of Cinder City. First, it gives her energy if someone from the team, including her, triggers a Night Soul Burst, but more importantly, the 4-piece set effect gives up to 40% elemental damage bonus to the whole team if she triggers a Geo-related reaction. Note that the buff is for the Geo and the related element. With this, it is important to apply your main DPS's elemental aura to an enemy first before using her skill for her to trigger a crystallized reaction. Sadly, this only works for Geo and Pyro, Hydro, Cryo, and Electro since Geo does not interact with Dendro and Animo. This does not only work well if you're using her as a support, but also as a DPS, but it is better for other Natlan characters to use this artifact set like Kachina, or maybe the Pyro Archon soon. Then use another offensive artifact for her when building her as a DPS. But what we can learn from this artifact set is that using this for her might make her as good, if not better, than Kazuha. As a DPS, the other Natlan artifact, Obsidian Codex, will be her best in slot. This basically gives her a damage bonus while also giving her a ton of crit rate, so you can focus on stacking on def and crit damage. Another viable artifact is the Husk of Opulent Dreams, since it can give her tons of def and geo damage too. Other artifact sets that might not be the best but still usable are the following. Xilonen has a lot of potential teams. As a support, the possibilities are endless. First, she definitely works well with Natlan characters like Moalani, whose burst damage increases after a nearby party member triggers a Night Soul Burst. Outside Natlan characters, you can basically just use all teams Zhongli works well with and switch Xilonen with him. Just make sure that there are more than 2 samplers that are converted. For example, Hu Tao Hyper Carry. Arlecchino will also benefit in using her, but just know that she cannot be healed by Xilonen. But basically, you can just pair her up with any Pyro, Hydro, Cryo, or Electromain DPSs. As a DPS, you want someone that can wear the Natlan support artifact like Kachina to also trigger Geo Resonance, so Xilonen can wear the Obsidian Codex. But if you do not want to, just make sure that there are less than 2 Pyro or Hydro, Cryo, or Electro characters in the team to not activate her samplers. So, Goro and Zhongli are great supports. Adding one off-field sub-DPS is also an option for her to trigger the Natlan support artifact buff and also to output more team damage. So, answering our $1,000,000 question, is pulling for her worth it? My answer is yes. So far, I can say that she can compete with seasoned supports like Zhongli and Kazuha. If you already have good supports, I still would recommend pulling for her since it gives you more options for support, and pairing her up with other supports will definitely make your life easier. But if you're planning to pull for her as a main DPS, I cannot recommend this since there are other DPSs that can output more damage like Navia. Another great thing about Xilonen though is she is very F2P friendly and easy to build. And just like other Natlan characters released so far, her exploration, especially in Natlan, is great. It would surely add value to your account, so I would definitely recommend pulling for her. We reached the end of the video. What are your thoughts on Xilonen? Comment below. Again, this is Earlbedo. See you next time.